I never thought I'd spend Christmas Eve being told I was nothing more than a burden. My name is Eleanor Pritchard, and I'm 71 years old. For the past 25 years, I've lived in what I thought was my daughter's home, a beautiful 3-bedroom apartment in downtown Minneapolis with hardwood floors that caught the morning light just right and windows that overlooked the city I'd known my entire life. I raised my daughter Rebecca there after my husband died, worked 2 jobs to keep that roof over our heads, and when she married Daniel Crenshaw, I welcomed him into our lives like he was my own son. But that Christmas party, the one where everything shattered, taught me something I should have learned decades ago. Kindness without boundaries is just another word for weakness. Before I tell you what happened that night, before I explain how I watched my carefully constructed world collapse in front of 37 dinner guests while Christmas music played mockingly in the background, I need you to understand something. If you're watching this from wherever you are in the world, and please, drop a comment and tell me where that is, because I want to know I'm not alone in this, then you need to know that this story isn't just about revenge. It's about remembering who you were before people convinced you to become smaller. And if you've ever felt invisible in your own life, if you've ever been made to feel like your existence was an inconvenience, then what I'm about to share with you might just change everything. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because the stories I'm going to tell you, the ones tucked away in the description box below, they're all about women like us who refuse to disappear quietly. The morning of December 23rd started like any other Friday. I woke at 5:30, same as always, because old habits from my waitressing days never really leave you. The apartment was silent except for the radiator's familiar hiss and the distant sound of traffic beginning its daily crescendo. I made my way to the kitchen, my joints protesting with each step. Arthritis has a way of reminding you that time is nobody's friend, and started the coffee maker that I'd bought with my own money 3 years ago when the old one finally gave up. Daniel had already left for his morning run. He did that every day, rain or shine, always returning exactly 47 minutes later with that self-satisfied flush of someone who believes physical fitness makes them morally superior. Rebecca was still asleep, her bedroom door closed at the end of the hallway. She'd been sleeping later and later these past few months, and I'd learned not to ask why. I stood at the kitchen window, watching the city wake up, and felt that familiar tightness in my chest, the one that had been growing stronger for the past year. It wasn't anxiety exactly. It was more like the feeling you get when you realize you've been holding your breath for so long you've forgotten what it feels like to breathe normally. The coffee finished brewing with a final sputter, and I poured myself a cup in the chipped mug that said "World's Best Mom." A Mother's Day gift from Rebecca when she was 12. Back when she still looked at me like I hung the moon instead of like I was a piece of furniture she'd grown tired of dusting around. I heard Daniel's key in the lock at exactly 6:17. He came in with that purposeful stride of his, already pulling out his phone, already mentally somewhere else. He was 49 years old, with the kind of lean build that came from obsessive gym routines and the square jaw that had probably helped him close more real estate deals than his actual competence ever did. "Coffee's ready," I said, because that's what I always said. He grunted, which is what he always did. He poured himself a cup, added exactly 2 pumps of that expensive sugar-free vanilla syrup he special ordered, and checked his phone. The kitchen filled with that particular silence that happens when 2 people are in the same room but might as well be on different planets. "Big party tomorrow," I ventured, wiping down the counter that didn't need wiping. "Yeah." He didn't look up. "Rebecca's handling the caterer. Make sure you stay out of the way when they're setting up." Stay out of the way. Those 4 words had become the soundtrack of my life in that apartment. Stay out of the way when Daniel's having a work call. Stay out of the way when Rebecca's entertaining friends. Stay out of the way when they're having couple time in the living room I'd picked out every piece of furniture for. I'd become a ghost in my own home, and the worst part? I'd let it happen so gradually that I couldn't pinpoint exactly when I'd stopped being Eleanor Pritchard, the woman who'd managed her entire diner staff, who'd negotiated with landlords and creditors, who'd once thrown a drunk customer out on his ass for getting handsy with one of my waitresses, and started being just Rebecca's mother who lived with them out of their generous charity. "I'll stay in my room," I said quietly. He finally looked up at me then, and something flickered across his face. Not quite guilt. More like irritation that I'd reminded him of my existence. "It's just easier that way, Eleanor. You understand." I did understand. I understood that I'd been erased so slowly and completely that even I had started to believe I deserved it. The rest of that day passed in the way days do when you're living in someone else's story instead of your own. Rebecca emerged around noon, beautiful and distant in the way she'd been since marrying Daniel. She had her father's eyes, my late husband Thomas's warm brown eyes, but they'd grown cold somehow, like windows that had frosted over. "Mom, did you pick up your prescription?" she asked, not looking at me, scrolling through her phone. "Yes, honey. Day before yesterday." "Good. I don't want you having one of your episodes during the party." My episodes. That's what they called it when my blood pressure spiked from stress, when the anxiety I'd developed over the past few years manifested in shaking hands and difficulty breathing. My doctor had told me it was situational, that my body was responding to chronic stress, but Daniel had convinced Rebecca it was just me being dramatic and attention-seeking. "I'll be fine," I said, because that's what I always said. Rebecca finally looked at me, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Was it concern? Regret? But then her phone buzzed, and whatever I'd seen disappeared like morning fog. "The caterer's coming at 3 tomorrow. Daniel's clients are coming at 6. It's really important for his career, Mom. These people are major investors." "I know, sweetheart. I'll help however I can." She sighed, that particular sigh that told me I'd said the wrong thing. "Actually, it would be better if you just, I don't know, maybe stay in your room until the party's underway. Daniel thinks it sends the wrong message if people know his mother-in-law lives with us." There it was. The truth that had been dancing around the edges of our conversations for months. I was an embarrassment. A liability. A living reminder that Daniel Crenshaw, rising star in Minneapolis real estate, hadn't quite achieved the picture-perfect life he'd been selling to his clients. I should have said something then. I should have asked my daughter when exactly I'd become something to be hidden away like a shameful secret. But I didn't. I just nodded and watched her walk away, her expensive boots clicking on the hardwood floors I'd refinished myself back when Rebecca was in high school. That night, I lay in my bedroom, the smallest of the 3 bedrooms, the one that used to be my sewing room before it became the guest room before it became Eleanor's room, and stared at the ceiling. The apartment was quiet except for the muffled sound of Daniel and Rebecca's television through the wall. They were watching something that made them laugh occasionally, that comfortable shared laughter of people who belong together in a way that explicitly excludes anyone else. I thought about Thomas then, about how different things might have been if he hadn't died of a heart attack at 47, leaving me with a 13-year-old daughter and a mountain of medical debt. He'd been the kind of man who made you feel like you mattered, like your thoughts and feelings weren't inconveniences to be managed but treasures to be cherished. "What would you think of me now?" I whispered to the darkness. "Would you even recognize me?" Because I barely recognized myself anymore. The woman in my bathroom mirror, with her thinning grey hair and the permanent worry lines etched into her forehead, she looked like a stranger who'd forgotten how to stand up straight. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept thinking about the party, about staying in my room like a punishment, about the way Daniel's face had looked when he told me to stay out of the way. Like I was something stuck to his shoe that he was too polite to scrape off. But I didn't know yet. I didn't know that the next evening would be the night everything changed. I didn't know that Daniel Crenshaw's arrogance would finally, catastrophically, exceed his common sense. And I certainly didn't know that I was about to remember something I'd forgotten over 25 years of making myself smaller and quieter and more convenient. I was about to remember that Eleanor Pritchard had never been anyone's ghost. She'd just been waiting for the right moment to come back to life. Christmas Eve morning arrived with that peculiar quality light gets in Minnesota winters, pale and crystalline, like the world had been dipped in sugar glass. I woke early again, my body refusing to break patterns even when my mind begged for the oblivion of sleep. The apartment was already buzzing with activity. I could hear Daniel's voice from the living room, sharp and authoritative, directing someone, probably the caterer, with the kind of precision he usually reserved for subordinates. Rebecca's higher-pitched interjections punctuated his commands like exclamation points. I stayed in bed for an extra 20 minutes, putting off the inevitable moment when I'd have to navigate the minefield of their expectations. Through my bedroom window, I could see fresh snow beginning to fall, those fat, lazy flakes that looked like something from a greeting card. It should have felt magical. Instead, it felt like a shroud. When I finally emerged, the apartment had been transformed. The living room, my living room, though I'd stopped thinking of it that way years ago, was filled with people in black uniforms carrying trays and boxes. The dining table had been extended with leaves I'd forgotten we had, and someone was laying out what looked like actual silver candlesticks. "Mom." Rebecca's voice cut through the organized chaos. She appeared from the kitchen wearing a burgundy dress that probably cost more than I'd spent on groceries in 6 months. "I thought we agreed you'd stay out of the way." It was 9 in the morning. The party wasn't for 9 hours. I just need some coffee, I said, hating how apologetic my voice sounded. Daniel materialized behind Rebecca like her shadow made solid. He was dressed in what he probably thought was casual elegance, dark slacks and a crisp white shirt that had definitely been professionally pressed. His expression when he looked at me was the same one you'd give a dog that had tracked mud across a clean floor. "Eleanor," he said, and my name in his mouth sounded like a reprimand. "We've got a lot happening today. Maybe you could take your coffee back to your room? Just until we get things set up." 9 in the morning. My own kitchen. The coffee maker I'd bought. "Of course," I heard myself say. "I'll just—" "Actually," Rebecca interrupted, and something in her tone made my stomach clench. "Mom, maybe today you could stay in your room entirely? It's just that Daniel's been so stressed, and these investors are so important, and I don't want her wandering around while my guests are here," Daniel cut in, not bothering to lower his voice despite the caterers pretending not to listen. "It sends the wrong message." There it was again. The wrong message. As if my existence was some kind of false advertising. I should have fought back. I should have reminded them both that this apartment, this entire life they were living, existed because of choices I'd made and sacrifices I'd endured. But I didn't. I just nodded, poured my coffee into a travel mug, and retreated to my room like a scolded child. The hours crawled by with excruciating slowness. I sat on my bed, the double bed that used to be in Rebecca's childhood room before they replaced it with a queen, and listened to the sounds of the party preparations. Laughter filtered through my door. The clink of glasses. The caterers asking questions and Daniel's booming responses. Rebecca's delighted giggle when someone apparently did something right. Around 4 in the afternoon, I heard new voices. Early arrivals, probably. Daniel's voice shifted into what I privately called his networking mode, louder, more jovial, with that practiced warmth that he could turn on and off like a faucet. I picked up the book I'd been trying to read for 3 weeks, but the words blurred together. My mind kept circling back to the same thoughts, the same questions I'd been asking myself for months. When did it get this bad? When did I become someone who hid in her own home? When did my daughter start looking at me like I was a problem to be managed instead of a person to be loved? The apartment grew louder as more guests arrived. Through my door, I could hear the party taking shape, the crescendo of conversations, the periodic eruption of laughter, the clink and clatter of plates and silverware. Christmas music played in the background, one of those jazzy versions of classics that was clearly chosen to sound sophisticated rather than festive. At 5:30, someone knocked on my door. I opened it to find Rebecca standing there with a plate of appetizers and a glass of water. "I brought you some food," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. The plate held exactly 4 items, a stuffed mushroom, 2 pieces of bruschetta, and a small slice of brie with crackers. The kind of portions that suggested an afterthought, an obligation fulfilled with minimal effort. "Thank you, honey," I said, taking the plate. She lingered in the doorway for a moment, and I saw that flicker again, that brief shadow of the daughter I used to know. The little girl who used to crawl into my lap when she had nightmares. The teenager who'd sobbed in my arms when her first boyfriend broke her heart. The college student who'd called me every Sunday without fail. "Mom, she started, then stopped. From the living room, Daniel's voice called her name, sharp with expectation. "I should get back," she said quickly. "Just stay in here, okay? It'll be over in a few hours." She closed the door before I could respond. I sat on my bed with my plate of scraps and felt something shift inside me. It wasn't anger yet. It was something colder, more calculating. It was the first whisper of a question I should have asked myself years ago. Why was I allowing this to happen? The party crescendoed into full swing. I could track Daniel's progress through the apartment by the volume of his voice, holding court in the living room, then moving to the dining room, then back to the living room. He laughed too loudly at jokes that probably weren't that funny. He used phrases like market positioning and vertical integration with the confidence of someone who believed his own press releases. Around 7 o'clock, I heard him toasting something. Glasses clinked. People cheered. Then his voice rose above the crowd, to another record-breaking year, and to the many more to come. More cheering. More clinking. The party rolled on without me, as if I didn't exist at all. I ate my 4 appetizers slowly, making each bite last. The food was good, the caterer clearly knew what they were doing, but it tasted like ashes in my mouth. When I finished, I set the plate on my nightstand and stared at my reflection in the dresser mirror across from my bed. The woman looking back at me was 71 years old. She had grey hair that needed cutting, a face lined with decades of hard work and harder choices, and eyes that had seen too much disappointment. She was wearing a cardigan that had been washed so many times the elbows were thin, and slippers that had lost their shape years ago. She looked like someone who'd given up. Someone who'd decided that taking up less space, making less noise, requiring less consideration was the price of being allowed to exist. I'd become a ghost. Not gradually, not accidentally, but through 1,000 tiny surrenders, a million little moments when I'd chosen peace over dignity, accommodation over assertion. I'd let myself be erased one syllable at a time until I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. But underneath that ghost, somewhere deep beneath the layers of learned helplessness and manufactured gratitude, Eleanor Pritchard was still alive. She was buried under years of yes, of course, and whatever you think is best, and I don't want to be a burden. But she was still there. And she was starting to get angry. The party continued its raucous course on the other side of my door. I heard someone drop a glass, the sharp crack followed by immediate apologies and laughter. I heard a woman with a braying laugh tell a story about her vacation in Cabo. I heard Daniel's voice weaving through it all, always performing, always selling some version of himself that bore only passing resemblance to the man who lived behind closed doors. Around 8 o'clock, the noise level shifted. Conversations grew louder, more animated. Someone had probably broken out the good whiskey that Daniel kept in the cabinet over the refrigerator. The expensive stuff he never let anyone touch except on special occasions. I sat in my dim room with only my bedside lamp for light and felt that cold thing inside me crystallizing into something sharper, more defined. It wasn't just anger. It was clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you finally stop lying to yourself about a situation you've been tolerating for far too long. I thought about the past 25 years. About how I'd moved into this apartment with Rebecca after Thomas died, how I'd worked double shifts at the diner to keep us afloat while she finished high school. I thought about paying for her college textbooks when financial aid fell short. I thought about the down payment on her first car, the expensive bridesmaid dresses for her wedding, the countless little emergencies I'd solved with my waitress tips and my rainy day savings. I thought about how, when Daniel proposed, he'd shaken my hand and called me Mom and promised he'd take care of both of us. How I'd believed him. How stupid I'd been. I thought about the year after their wedding, when Daniel got laid off and couldn't make rent. How I'd covered their bills for 4 months straight while he networked and Rebecca stress shopped online. How they'd never quite paid me back, and how I'd never quite asked them to. I thought about when Daniel's real estate career finally took off, how they'd started talking about moving to a bigger place. How those plans had quietly died without explanation. How I'd slowly realized they were planning to keep living in my apartment, the one I'd paid rent on for 2 decades before they'd moved in, because it was convenient and free and I'd never demanded anything different. The realization hit me like cold water. I hadn't moved in with them. They'd moved in with me and convinced everyone, including me, that it was the other way around. The apartment lease had always been in my name. When Thomas died, his life insurance had barely covered his medical debts, but I'd kept us housed, kept us fed, kept us moving forward. This place was mine. The rent checks came from my bank account. The lease renewal I signed every year had my name on it. Eleanor Jean Pritchard. Not Daniel Crenshaw. Not Rebecca Pritchard Crenshaw. Mine. How had I forgotten that? How had I let them rewrite the story so completely that I'd started believing I lived here at their pleasure, that this was their home and I was just a tolerated guest? I stood up from my bed, my legs unsteady, my heart pounding. Through the door, the party raged on, oblivious. Daniel was holding court somewhere out there, basking in the admiration of people who didn't know him, who saw only the polished surface he presented to the world. And I was trapped in my own bedroom like a prisoner, eating scraps off a plate, hiding my existence like it was something shameful. Not anymore. I don't know what possessed me in that moment. Maybe it was 25 years of swallowed pride finally demanding to be acknowledged. Maybe it was the ghost of Thomas whispering in my ear that I'd forgotten who I was. Maybe it was just the simple, startling realization that I'd spent so long being afraid of being a burden that I'd become one through my own passivity. Whatever it was, it lit something inside me that I'd thought was dead. I walked to my closet and pulled out the dress I'd bought for Rebecca's wedding. A simple navy sheath that had cost me a week's tips but had made me feel elegant and important. It still fit, though it hung a little looser than it had 5 years ago. I found my good shoes, the ones I'd worn maybe 3 times. I brushed my hair and pinned it back with the silver clips Thomas had given me on our 20th anniversary. I put on lipstick for the first time in months. Burgundy, like Rebecca's dress. In the mirror, I saw Eleanor Pritchard looking back at me. Not a ghost. Not an inconvenience. Not someone's burden. Just a woman who'd forgotten her own strength and was only now beginning to remember. I heard Daniel's voice from the living room, louder now, more expansive. He was telling a story that involved his investment philosophy and his commitment to excellence. People were laughing at all the right moments. He sounded like a man who believed the world belonged to him, who'd never known a consequence he couldn't talk his way out of. He had no idea what was coming. Neither did I, not really. But I knew this, I was done hiding. I was done pretending my existence was negotiable. I was done letting other people decide whether I mattered. I put my hand on the doorknob and took a deep breath. The party was about to get a guest they weren't expecting. I opened my bedroom door at exactly 8:47 p.m. I know because I glanced at the small clock on my nightstand as I turned the handle, and that detail, those specific numbers, burned themselves into my memory with the kind of clarity that only comes from moments that change everything. The hallway stretched before me like a stage, leading from the shadows where I'd been exiled into the bright, glittering chaos of the party. I could see into the living room from where I stood, all those well-dressed people holding wine glasses, their faces flushed with warmth and alcohol and the particular pleasure that comes from feeling like you're part of something exclusive. None of them noticed me at first. Why would they? I'd perfected the art of being invisible. I walked down the hallway slowly, my good shoes clicking softly against the hardwood. Each step felt like a small reclamation, a tiny rebellion against the 1,000 times I tiptoed through my own home to avoid disturbing the people who'd convinced me their comfort mattered more than my dignity. The first person to see me was a young woman in her 30s, blonde and polished, holding a glass of champagne. Her eyes widened slightly as I emerged into the living room, and I watched her lean toward the man next to her, whispering something behind her manicured hand. Then another guest noticed. And another. Like dominoes falling in slow motion, conversations faltered and heads turned. The Christmas music continued its jazzy percolation, oblivious to the shift in the room's energy. Daniel was standing near the fireplace, my fireplace, the one I'd had the landlord install back in 2003, surrounded by a group of men in expensive suits. He had a whiskey glass in one hand and was gesturing expansively with the other, mid-story about something that involved his acumen and someone else's foolishness. He saw me. His eyes locked onto mine across the room, and I watched his expression cycle through surprise, confusion, and then something harder. Annoyance. Anger. Rebecca was near the dining room table, talking to an older couple. She saw me next, and the color drained from her face like someone had pulled a plug. I walked into my living room, not sneaking, not apologizing, not trying to make myself smaller. I walked in like I owned the place, because despite everything they'd done to make me forget it, I did. Mom. Rebecca's voice cut through the dying conversations. She rushed toward me with that particular smile people wear when they're desperately trying to pretend everything is fine while simultaneously having a crisis. What are you you feeling okay? Do you need something? She'd positioned herself between me and the room like a human shield, trying to herd me back toward my exile. I'm feeling fine, Rebecca. My voice came out steadier than I expected. I thought I'd join the party. But we talked about this, she hissed, quiet enough that the nearby guests couldn't hear. You said you'd stay in your room. No, I corrected gently. You told me to stay in my room. I don't recall agreeing. Daniel had abandoned his story and was making his way toward us, his smile fixed but his eyes hard. Several of his colleagues followed, sensing drama the way sharks sense blood. Eleanor. Daniel's voice was too loud, too hearty, performing for the audience. I didn't realize you were feeling up to joining us. I thought you weren't well. It was masterful, really. In one sentence, he'd painted me as an invalid making an inappropriate appearance, something to be indulged and managed. I'm feeling perfectly well, Daniel. Thank you for your concern. The room had gone almost completely silent now. Even the people who'd been too absorbed in their own conversations were watching us, alert to the tension crackling beneath our polite words. Well, that's wonderful, Daniel said, still wearing that smile. But as you can see, we're right in the middle of things here. Important business discussions. Maybe you'd be more comfortable. I'm quite comfortable right here, I said. In my living room. Something flickered in Daniel's eyes. Of course, of course. We're all comfortable here. But you know, these are work colleagues, and the conversations are rather technical. I wouldn't want you to feel left out or bored. Let me get you a plate of food, Mom, Rebecca interrupted desperately. You must be hungry. Come to the kitchen with me. She grabbed my elbow, trying to steer me away, but I didn't move. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and saw my daughter's face twisted with anxiety and embarrassment. Embarrassment of me. I don't want food, Rebecca. I had the 4 appetizers you brought me earlier. Remember? The room was dead silent now except for the cheerful oblivious jazz still playing in the background. Someone had the sense to turn down the volume. Eleanor, Daniel said, and now the warmth was completely gone from his voice. You're making a scene. These are important clients. I need you to go back to your room right now. There it was. The truth, stripped of all pretense. Go back to your room. Like I was a child being punished. Like I was his property to command. No, I said simply. The word hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't quite exploded yet. Daniel's face went red. What did you just say to me? I said no. My voice was still calm, still steady, but something had shifted inside me. That cold, sharp thing had grown teeth. I'm not going back to my room. This is my home, and these are my holidays, and I'm going to spend them however I choose. Your home. Daniel laughed, but it was ugly, harsh. Eleanor, I think you're confused. This is our apartment. Mine and Rebecca's. You live here because we're kind enough to let you. Daniel, stop, Rebecca whispered, tugging at his arm. But Daniel was drunk now, not just on alcohol, though the whiskey had certainly helped, but on his own anger, his own sense of authority being challenged in front of the people he'd been trying to impress all night. No, Rebecca. She needs to understand the situation here. He turned back to me, and his eyes were cold. You've been living off us for years now. We've been supporting you, housing you, putting up with your presence because you're Rebecca's mother and that's what family does. But you don't get to disrespect me in front of my guests. The room was frozen. 37 people holding their breath, witnessing a domestic drama they hadn't signed up for. Someone's phone was probably recording. This would be gossip at their offices on Monday. Supporting me. I repeated, and something in my voice made several people take a step back. Daniel, perhaps you'd like to tell your guests exactly how you've been supporting me. Mom, please, Rebecca begged. Tears were streaming down her face now, ruining her perfect makeup. Tell them how much rent you pay for this apartment, I continued. My heart was racing, but my voice was diamond hard. Tell them whose name is on the lease. Tell them who pays the bills every month while you spend your commissions on watches and vacations. Daniel's face went from red to purple. You ungrateful. Tell them, Daniel. This is ridiculous, he sputtered. Rebecca, control your mother. This is inappropriate. These are business associates, and she's making wild accusations. They're not accusations if they're true, I said. Would you like me to show your guests my bank statements? My rent receipts? The lease agreement with my signature at the bottom? The silence in that room was absolute. I could hear someone's champagne glass shaking slightly, the liquid trembling with their hand. Rebecca was crying openly now, her burgundy dress and her perfect hair and her careful makeup all meaningless against the reality crashing down around us. I felt a pang of guilt. She was still my daughter, still the little girl I'd raised, but I was so tired of protecting her from consequences, so tired of making myself small so she could pretend her life was perfect. Daniel looked around at his guests, at all those faces watching him with varying degrees of shock and fascination and dawning understanding. His carefully constructed image was crumbling in real time, and he knew it. And that's when he made his biggest mistake. Fine, he said, his voice shaking with rage. Fine. You want to make this ugly? Let's make it ugly. The truth is, Eleanor, you've been a burden on us for years. An embarrassment. Do you know what people say when they find out my mother-in-law lives with us? Do you know how that makes us look? Daniel, please stop, Rebecca sobbed. No. She wants the truth. She'll get it. I've been patient, Rebecca's been patient, but this is too much. I'm done pretending you're welcome here. I'm done tiptoeing around your feelings. I'm done sharing my home with someone who doesn't contribute anything but complaints and neediness. Each word was a slap. Each sentence was meant to hurt. Around us, guests were edging toward the door, suddenly remembering other places they needed to be. So here's what's going to happen, Daniel continued, his voice rising. After tonight, after this scene you've created, you're going to pack your things. You're going to find somewhere else to live. You're going to stop being our problem. The room held its breath. When? I asked quietly. What? When do you want me gone? He looked around at his guests, at the ruins of his perfect party, at the end of the evening he'd planned so carefully. His eyes were wild with alcohol and fury and humiliation. Tomorrow, he said. I want you out tomorrow. Rebecca gasped. Daniel, you can't. She started this, Rebecca. She wanted to embarrass me in front of everyone. Fine. Tomorrow. Pack your shit and get out. I looked at my daughter, at her tear-streaked face and her trembling hands. I looked at the guests, some filming now, others just staring with open mouths. I looked at Daniel, standing there like an emperor who'd just delivered an edict, convinced of his power, certain of his authority. And I smiled. It wasn't a big smile. Just a small curve at the corner of my mouth. But it was enough to make Daniel pause, to make him uncertain for just a moment. Okay, I said simply. Tomorrow it is. I turned and walked back to my room, leaving chaos in my wake. Behind me, I heard voices erupting, guests talking over each other, Rebecca crying, Daniel trying to regain control of the situation with increasingly desperate explanations. I closed my bedroom door and leaned against it, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst through my ribs. My hands were shaking. My whole body was trembling with adrenaline and fear and something else, something I hadn't felt in years. Power. I'd stood up. I'd spoken truth. I'd refused to be erased. And tomorrow, Daniel Crenshaw was going to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. You don't kick someone out of their own home. Not without consequences. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? My body was still vibrating with the aftermath of confrontation, with years of suppressed anger finally finding its voice. Through my bedroom door, I could hear the party dissolving, the hurried goodbyes, the whispered conversations, the sound of people evacuating as quickly as politely possible. By 9:30, the apartment was silent except for the muffled sound of Daniel's voice, low and furious, and Rebecca's crying responses. They were fighting, probably about me, probably about how I'd ruined everything. Part of me felt guilty. A smaller part of me than I expected. Around midnight, I heard Rebecca's soft knock on my door. Mom? Can I come in? I almost said no. Almost told her that I was done being the one who made everything okay, who absorbed everyone else's anxiety and anger and disappointment. But she was still my daughter. That hadn't changed, even if everything else had. Come in, honey. She opened the door and slipped inside, closing it quickly behind her like she didn't want Daniel to know she was here. Her makeup was ruined, her expensive dress wrinkled. She looked young and lost, like the teenager who'd once come to me with every problem, every heartbreak, every fear. Mom, I'm so sorry, she whispered, sitting on the edge of my bed. He didn't mean it. He was drunk and stressed, Anne. He meant every word, Rebecca. She flinched. He's just been under so much pressure. This deal with the investors is huge for him, and when you came out like that. When I came out of my bedroom in my own home. I kept my voice gentle, but firm. Is that what upset him? That I dared to exist where his colleagues could see me? It's not like that. But her voice was weak, unconvincing even to herself. What is it like, then? Explain it to me, because I'm trying to understand when exactly I became something to be ashamed of. Rebecca's face crumpled. I'm not ashamed of you. Daniel has a certain image he needs to maintain for his career, and having his mother-in-law living with us, it doesn't fit that image. I thought if we could just keep things separate, keep his work life and our home life distinct. By hiding me in my room like I'm something broken that needs to be kept out of sight. She didn't answer. She just cried harder, and I felt that familiar pull, that maternal instinct to comfort, to fix, to make her pain go away at whatever cost to myself. But I didn't reach for her. Not this time. Rebecca, honey, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Tomorrow, when Daniel tells me to leave, what do you think is going to happen? I'll talk to him, she said quickly. Once he calms down, once he sobers up, I'll make him see reason. You don't have to leave. We'll figure something out. Figure what out? Another few years of me living like a prisoner in my own home? Another few years of staying quiet and small and invisible so Daniel can pretend he's got the perfect life? Mom, please. I know it hasn't been ideal, but… Who pays the rent on this apartment, Rebecca? She froze. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes darted away from mine. Who pays the rent? I repeated. You do, she whispered. But Daniel and I pay for everything else. Groceries, utilities, streaming services. The lease is in my name. The rent check comes from my bank account. Every month for the past 29 years. Did you know that? I guess I never really thought about it. Or did Daniel tell you not to think about it? Did he convince you that because he makes more money than me, because he pays for the nice dinners and the vacations and the designer handbags, that somehow this became his apartment? Rebecca stood up abruptly. What are you saying? I'm saying that when Daniel tells me to get out tomorrow, he's going to be very surprised by what happens next. Mom, what are you going to do? I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd raised, who I'd sacrificed so much for, who'd stood by while her husband treated me like garbage, and felt a complicated tangle of love and disappointment and resignation. I'm going to stop pretending, I said. I'm going to stop acting like I'm lucky to be tolerated in my own home. And I'm going to stop protecting Daniel from the consequences of his choices. You're scaring me. Good. Maybe you should be scared. Maybe you should think about what happens when you spend years taking someone for granted. She backed toward the door. I'm going to talk to Daniel. We'll fix this. Just, please don't do anything crazy. After she left, I sat in the darkness and waited for morning. Outside my window, snow continued to fall, covering the city in white. It should have been beautiful. It should have felt like Christmas. Instead, it felt like the quiet before an explosion. At 7 a.m., I heard Daniel moving around the apartment. Heavy footsteps, cabinet doors closing with unnecessary force. He was making noise deliberately, asserting his presence, reminding me that he was in charge. I got dressed carefully. Not in anything fancy this time. Just my regular jeans and a sweater, comfortable shoes. I pulled my grey hair back in a simple ponytail. I looked in the mirror and saw Eleanor Pritchard looking back. Not the ghost, not the burden, just a woman who'd finally remembered she had options. I waited until 8 o'clock, then emerged from my room. Daniel was in the kitchen, drinking coffee and scrolling through his phone. He looked up when I entered, and his expression was hard, unrepentant. Whatever shame or regret he might have felt in the sober light of morning was buried deep beneath his ego. Eleanor. He said my name like it was a formality. I hope you've had time to think about finding a new place to live. I have, actually. Good. I've called a few extended stay hotels. There's one about 15 minutes from here that has availability. I'm willing to cover the first month as a gesture of goodwill. A gesture of goodwill. He was kicking me out and calling it charity. That's very generous of you, Daniel. He looked surprised by my calm tone. He'd probably expected tears, begging, drama. That's what the old Eleanor would have given him. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this, he said. I think, in the long run, this is better for everyone. You'll have your independence. We'll have our privacy. It's a win-win. Absolutely. In fact, I've been thinking about exactly that. Independence. Fresh starts. New arrangements. Rebecca appeared from the bedroom, her eyes swollen from crying. Mom, please. Let's all just sit down and talk about this calmly. There's nothing to talk about, Daniel said. This has been a long time coming. Your mother and I both know she can't stay here anymore. Not after last night. You're right, I said. I can't stay here anymore. Rebecca let out a sob of relief. Thank you, Mom. Thank you for understanding. No, honey. You don't understand. I can't stay here because you two are the ones who need to leave. Silence dropped like a guillotine. Daniel's expression shifted from confident to confused to angry in rapid succession. What the hell are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that this apartment is mine. The lease is in my name. The rent comes from my account. Which means legally, I'm the tenant and you two are my guests. Guests who, as of last night, are no longer welcome. The coffee mug in Daniel's hand trembled slightly. You're insane. We've been living here for 8 years. As my guests. Guests who never paid rent, never contributed to the lease, never had any legal claim to this space. Guests who, I should mention, I never formally invited to stay indefinitely. Rebecca's face had gone white. Mom, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Daniel wanted me out by today. So I'm giving you both the same courtesy. I want you out by the end of the week. Daniel slammed his mug down on the counter. This is ridiculous. You can't just kick us out. We live here. We have rights. Actually, you don't. I checked with a tenant rights attorney. Yes, I called one at 6 this morning. They have emergency lines for situations like this. You're not on the lease, you've never paid rent, and while you've lived here for 8 years, you've done so under what's called a license, not a tenancy. Which means I can revoke that license with reasonable notice. A week is more than reasonable. The look on Daniel's face was something I'd never seen before. Total, complete shock. His mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. This is crazy, he finally managed. Rebecca, your mother has lost her mind. We need to call someone. Call whoever you want, I said calmly. Call a lawyer. Call the police. They'll tell you exactly what I just told you. This is my apartment, and I want you gone. We'll fight this, Daniel said, his voice rising. We'll sue you. We'll. On what grounds? That I let you live rent-free in my apartment for 8 years and now I'm asking you to leave? Good luck with that. And while we're discussing things, I should mention that I've been keeping very detailed records. Every time you've stopped me from accessing common areas. Every time you've told me to stay in my room. Every time you've treated me like an unwelcome guest in my own home. That's called harassment, Daniel. Some lawyers might even call it elder abuse. Rebecca was crying again, but this time it was different. This wasn't sad crying. This was panicked crying. Mom, where are we supposed to go? You could try one of those extended stay hotels Daniel mentioned. I hear they have availability. This is because of last night, Daniel said, his voice shaking with rage. This is revenge because I embarrassed you in front of people. No, Daniel. This is because you told me to get out of my own home. This is because you've spent years treating me like I was lucky to be tolerated. This is because my daughter stood by and watched it happen. This is because I finally realized that I don't have to live like a ghost just to keep the peace. We have nowhere to go, Rebecca whispered. And there it was. The truth that I'd been too polite, too accommodating, too afraid to acknowledge for years. They needed me. They'd always needed me. The apartment, the free housing, the built-in babysitter for future grandchildren they'd vaguely talked about. They'd needed me while simultaneously making me feel like I was the burden. You have a week to figure it out, I said. The same amount of time you were going to give me. Less, actually, since Daniel wanted me out today. But I'm more generous than he is. Daniel's face had gone from purple to a sick grey. Eleanor, if you do this, if you actually go through with this insanity, you'll destroy your relationship with your daughter forever. Is that what you want? I looked at Rebecca, standing there with her ruined face and her expensive clothes and her complete inability to stand up for herself or her mother. I hope not, I said softly. I really, really hope not. But Rebecca is going to have to decide what kind of person she wants to be. And so am I. This is blackmail, Daniel spat. Emotional manipulation. No, Daniel. This is consequences. You spent years convinced that I had no power, no options, nowhere to go. You treated me accordingly. And now you're discovering that you were wrong. I walked to the coffee maker, my coffee maker, and poured myself a cup. Daniel and Rebecca stood frozen, watching me like I'd grown a second head. I'll be staying in my room for most of the week, I said. To give you privacy while you pack. I expect you to be civil. I expect you to be respectful. And I expect you to be gone by 5 p.m. next Sunday. If you're not, I'll start formal eviction proceedings, which will be much less pleasant for everyone. Mom, please, Rebecca tried one more time. Can't we just talk about this? Can't we find some kind of compromise? I looked at my daughter and felt a wave of sadness so profound it nearly knocked me over. But beneath the sadness was something else. Something I hadn't felt in so long I'd almost forgotten what it felt like. Self-respect. A compromise would have been you standing up for me, I said quietly. A compromise would have been you telling your husband that I wasn't an embarrassment or a burden. A compromise would have been you remembering that I'm your mother and I deserve basic dignity. But we're past compromises now, honey. We're in consequences. I took my coffee and walked back to my room, leaving them standing in the kitchen, my kitchen, trying to figure out how their world had just turned completely upside down. Through the door, I heard Daniel explode. Furniture moving. His voice raised in fury. Rebecca's desperate attempts to calm him down. The chaos of people who'd built their lives on someone else's foundation suddenly discovering that foundation had teeth. I sat on my bed and sipped my coffee and waited for the next move. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Daniel wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully, and Rebecca was too dependent on him to think clearly. They would fight back. They would try to manipulate me, threaten me, maybe even try to turn other people against me. I knew how this would go. But for the first time in 25 years, I also knew something else. I was ready for it. If you've ever stood up to someone who's been controlling your life, you know what the next 48 hours feel like. It's not the victory you imagine when you fantasize about finally fighting back. It's messy and exhausting and filled with moments where you second-guess everything. But it's also necessary. And speaking of necessary, if you're finding this story hits close to home, if you've been in a situation where you've had to choose between peace and dignity, hit that subscribe button. Check the description below for more stories about people who decided they were done being doormats. Because you're not alone in this. None of us are. The first real counterattack came on Christmas Day morning, about 6 hours after our kitchen confrontation. I was in my room, trying to read but mostly just listening to the sounds of Daniel and Rebecca moving around the apartment, when I heard the knock that was too loud, too aggressive to be Rebecca. Eleanor. Open this door. We need to talk. Daniel. Using his reasonable businessman voice. The one that said he was being calm and mature while everyone else was being hysterical. I opened the door. He stood there with Rebecca slightly behind him, her face puffy and miserable. He was holding his phone in one hand like it was evidence at a trial. I've been making some calls, he said. Talking to people who know about tenant law. And the situation is more complicated than you're making it out to be. Is that right? We've been living here for 8 years, Eleanor. That establishes tenancy regardless of whose name is on the lease. You can't just kick us out with a week's notice. Minnesota law requires 30 days minimum, and that's for formal eviction proceedings which require cause. He'd done his homework. I had to give him that. But so had I. You're partially correct, I said. If you were established tenants paying rent, you'd be right. But you're not tenants. You've never paid rent. You've never signed a lease. You're licensees, which is different. And I can revoke a license with reasonable notice for any reason or no reason. That's your interpretation. That's also the interpretation of Margaret Chen at Hennepin County Legal Aid, who I spoke with extensively this morning. She's offered to represent me pro bono if this goes to court. Apparently, they get a lot of cases like this, families taking advantage of elderly relatives, housing disputes, financial exploitation. She was very interested in the details. Daniel's jaw clenched. Financial exploitation? We've been taking care of you. By living rent-free in my apartment while treating me like hired help? While telling me to hide in my room when you have company? By explicitly telling me last night that I was a burden you'd been putting up with? Daniel, I've been documenting everything. Including the fact that you've prevented me from having guests over, from using common areas freely, from having any say in how my own home is decorated or managed. That's not you taking care of me. That's you taking advantage of me. Rebecca made a small wounded sound. Mom, that's not fair. We didn't prevent you from anything. Really? When was the last time I had a friend over, Rebecca? When was the last time I hung a picture on a wall or rearranged furniture or made any decision about this apartment without checking with Daniel first? She opened her mouth, then closed it. She couldn't remember either, because it had never happened. Not once in 8 years. This is absurd, Daniel said. We're family. We're not your adversaries. We're not trying to hurt you. Then why did you tell me to get out? Silence. Why did you announce in front of 37 people that you'd been putting up with me? That I was a burden? That you wanted me gone by today? More silence. See, Daniel, Here's what you don't understand. I would have let this go. I would have kept living like a ghost, kept making myself small, kept accepting whatever crumbs of respect you felt like throwing my way. Because I loved my daughter and I didn't want to cause problems. But you pushed too far. You humiliated me publicly, and then you tried to throw me out of my own home. And now you're discovering that actions have consequences. Fine. Daniel's voice had gone cold. You want to play it this way? We'll move out. But don't expect any relationship with Rebecca after this. Don't expect to be part of our lives. Don't expect to see any grandchildren if we have them. You're choosing revenge over family, and you're going to regret it. There it was. The threat I'd known was coming. The manipulation that had worked on me for years. The fear of losing my daughter, of being alone, of being cut off from the only family I had left. I looked past Daniel to Rebecca, who was staring at the floor, tears dripping off her chin. Rebecca, honey, look at me. She raised her eyes, reluctantly. Are you telling me that if I don't let you and Daniel continue living here rent-free, if I don't continue tolerating being treated like a burden, you'll never speak to me again? Mom, I don't want it to be like this. That's not what I asked. I asked if you'll cut me out of your life because I'm standing up for myself. She looked at Daniel, then back at me, and I saw it happen, the moment she chose him over me. Over truth. Over basic decency. I think you're not thinking clearly right now, she said, her voice shaking. I think you're letting your emotions make you do something you'll regret. And yes, if you force us out, if you go through with this, I don't know if I can forgive that. The pain was sharp and sudden, like a knife between my ribs. My daughter. My baby girl. The one I'd raised alone after Thomas died. She was choosing the man who'd treated her mother like trash over the mother who'd sacrificed everything for her. But beneath the pain was something else. Clarity. Cold, brutal clarity. Then I guess you've made your choice, I said softly. Eleanor, don't do this, Daniel said, and now there was something that might have been panic in his voice. Be reasonable. Where are we supposed to go? We need time to find a place, to make arrangements. You have until Sunday. That's more than you were going to give me. This is elder abuse. Daniel's voice rose. You're using your position as the leaseholder to manipulate us, to control us. I almost laughed. Daniel, you can call the police if you like. Tell them I'm abusing you by asking you to find your own housing after 8 years of living rent-free. See how that goes. He stared at me, his face cycling through emotions too fast to track. Then he grabbed Rebecca's arm and pulled her away from my door, back toward their bedroom. You're going to regret this, he shouted over his shoulder. You're going to end up alone and miserable, and don't come crying to us when you realize what you've done. I closed my door and leaned against it, shaking. My heart was hammering. My hands were trembling. But I didn't cry. I didn't cry because I knew something Daniel didn't. Something Rebecca didn't. I'd already been alone. I'd been alone for years, even while living with them. I'd been isolated, marginalized, made to feel like I barely existed. The only difference now was that I was choosing it instead of having it imposed on me. And that made all the difference. The next 2 days were a war of attrition. Daniel and Rebecca didn't speak to me except through terse notes left on the kitchen counter. They made loud comments to each other about how unreasonable and unstable I was. They called friends and family members, spinning their version of events, trying to build a coalition against me. I know because Rebecca's cousin Jennifer called me on the 26th. Aunt Eleanor? It's Jennifer. I just got off the phone with Rebecca, and I'm really concerned about what's going on. Jennifer was 42, a nurse, generally sensible. I liked her. What did Rebecca tell you? I asked. She said you're kicking them out with no notice, that you had some kind of episode at their Christmas party, that she's worried you might not be thinking clearly. She mentioned that you've been under a lot of stress, and she wondered if maybe your medication needs adjusting. There it was. The narrative. I was old, confused, possibly mentally unwell. My actions weren't justified, they were symptoms. Jennifer, let me ask you something. When was the last time Rebecca invited you over to the apartment? Silence. Then, I don't know. It's been a while. It's been 8 years. Not once in 8 years has Rebecca had you over. Do you know why? I guess I figured everyone's busy. It's because Daniel didn't want anyone seeing that I lived there. It didn't fit his image. Rebecca went along with it. I've been living in that apartment, my apartment, that I pay for, like a prisoner for years. And on Christmas Eve, Daniel told me in front of 36 people that he'd been putting up with me and that he wanted me out the next day. So I'm giving them a week to leave. Does that sound like I'm having an episode, or does it sound like I'm standing up for myself? Long silence. Then, Rebecca didn't mention that part. No, I imagine she didn't. Jennifer, I love my daughter. But she's made choices, and those choices have consequences. I'm done setting myself on fire to keep other people warm. After we hung up, I sat with that phrase. I'd read it somewhere online, on one of those inspirational quote pages that usually felt trite and meaningless. But it was exactly right. I'd been burning myself up for years, and all it had gotten me was ash. That night, I heard Daniel and Rebecca fighting. Really fighting, not just the tense whispered arguments of the past few days. Their voices carried through the walls. This is your mother, Rebecca. You need to fix this. How? She won't listen to reason. She's made up her mind. Then make her change it. Cry, beg, do whatever you have to do. We can't afford a new place right now, not with my commissions tied up in that deal that hasn't closed yet. Maybe if you hadn't insulted her in front of everyone. Oh, so this is my fault? I'm not the one kicking my own mother out. You're the one who told her to leave. Because she was making a scene. I was trying to salvage the situation. I never thought she'd actually. Their voices faded as they moved to a different room, but I'd heard enough. The truth was finally coming out. They couldn't afford to leave. They'd been living rent-free for so long that they'd structured their entire financial life around not paying for housing. Daniel's expensive watches, Rebecca's designer clothes, their weekend trips to Chicago and Denver, all of it funded by the money they saved by taking advantage of me. And now that advantage was disappearing, and they were panicking. Good. On the 27th, Rebecca tried a different approach. She came to my room in the afternoon with a cup of tea and a tentative smile. Mom? Can we talk? I let her in. She sat on my bed, hands wrapped around the tea mug, trying to look small and vulnerable. I've been thinking a lot about everything, she said. And you're right. We haven't treated you well. Daniel especially, he's been under so much pressure, but that's no excuse. I should have stood up for you. I should have made sure you felt welcome here. Felt welcome in my own apartment, you mean? She flinched. Yes. That. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm really, truly sorry. I lost sight of what was important. I let Daniel's career and his opinions matter more than your feelings. That was wrong. It sounded sincere. It might even have been sincere, in the moment. But I'd learned something important over the past few days. Sincerity isn't enough when it comes without change. I appreciate that, Rebecca. I do. But apologies don't erase 8 years of making me feel like I didn't belong in my own home. I know. And I want to make it right. We could start over. Set some ground rules. Make sure you have equal say in decisions about the apartment. Make sure Daniel treats you with respect. Under what arrangement? She blinked. What do you mean? I mean, would you and Daniel be paying rent? Would we have a formal agreement about expenses and responsibilities? Or are you asking me to let you continue living here rent-free, with the promise that things will be different this time? Her face flushed. We could contribute more to household expenses. We could work out something fair. Could, or would? Would. We would. I promise. I looked at my daughter and saw the little girl who'd promised she'd clean her room, do her homework, practice piano, all the childhood promises that had evaporated as soon as the immediate crisis passed. Rebecca, I love you. You're my daughter and that will never change. But I don't trust you anymore. And I definitely don't trust Daniel. You've shown me who you are when it's inconvenient to stand up for what's right. And Daniel's shown me who he is when he thinks he has power over someone. Those aren't things that change just because the consequences finally showed up. So that's it. You're just giving up on us? On our relationship? No, honey. I'm giving up on the fantasy that I can have a relationship with you while also accepting mistreatment. I'm choosing self-respect over peace. It's a choice I should have made years ago. She stood up, the tea untouched. You know what? Daniel was right about you. You are manipulative. You're using this apartment as a weapon to control us, to punish us for not being perfect. And you're going to end up alone, and you're going to deserve it." The words hit like physical blows. My own daughter, saying I deserve to be alone. "Maybe I will be alone," I said quietly. "But I'll be alone with my dignity intact. Can you say the same?" She left, slamming the door behind her. I sat in the silence and let the tears come finally. Not because I regretted my choice, but because grief isn't only about death. Sometimes it's about watching someone you love choose to become someone you can barely recognize. 3 more days. 3 more days until they were supposed to be gone. I wondered if they'd actually leave, or if I'd have to follow through on my threat to file formal eviction papers. I wondered if Rebecca would ever speak to me again. I wondered if I was strong enough to live with the consequences of standing up for myself. But most of all, I wondered why it had taken me 71 years to learn that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to let go of the people who are drowning you. Saturday morning arrived with an ice storm. I woke to the sound of freezing rain pelting my window and the city outside transformed into a crystal nightmare, beautiful and treacherous in equal measure. The kind of weather that makes everything harder, that forces you to move carefully or risk falling. Appropriate, I thought. Tomorrow was Sunday. The deadline. And I still hadn't heard a word from Daniel or Rebecca about their plans. I'd been staying in my room for most of the past 3 days, only emerging for coffee and the occasional meal when I knew they were out or occupied. The apartment felt like a powder keg, each of us moving around each other with the careful tension of people trying not to be the spark that caused an explosion. But Saturday brought a new development. Around 10 in the morning, I heard voices in the living room. Not just Daniel and Rebecca's voices, other voices. Multiple people. Curious, I opened my door a crack and listened. Absolutely unreasonable. We've tried talking to her, tried reasoning with her, but she won't listen to logic. That was Daniel, using his consulting with advisor's voice. "And you're sure there's no legal recourse?" An unfamiliar male voice, professional, clipped. "We've talked to 3 different attorneys. They all say the same thing. She's technically within her rights because we never formalized a rental agreement." "What about adverse possession? 8 years of continuous occupation." "Doesn't apply. Adverse possession requires occupying property without permission. We had permission. The problem is that permission can be revoked." I recognized that voice now. Kevin Hartley, one of Daniel's colleagues from the real estate firm. He'd been at the Christmas party, had witnessed the whole confrontation. What about family court? Filing for some kind of conservatorship, proving she's not competent to make these decisions. My blood went cold. "We considered it," Rebecca's voice, small and miserable. "But Mom's not incompetent. She's angry, but she's not confused or unable to manage her affairs. No judge would grant conservatorship just because we don't like her decisions. So you're really out of options." This voice was female, older. I didn't recognize it. "Unless she changes her mind in the next 24 hours, yes." Daniel sounded exhausted. "We'd have to leave. And we don't have anywhere lined up yet. Every place we've looked at wants first month, last month, security deposit. We're talking $10,000 to $15,000 up front, minimum. Can't you tap into savings?" The female voice again. "We don't really have savings. Our money's all tied up in investments and Rebecca's retirement account. We've been living pretty comfortably because we haven't had to pay rent or mortgage." A long silence. Then Kevin's voice. "Daniel, I'm going to be honest with you. This looks really bad. If this story gets around, and it will, people at the party have been talking, it's going to damage your reputation. Successful realtor kicked out of apartment by elderly mother-in-law isn't exactly the professional image you want to project. Don't you think I know that?" Daniel snapped. "I'm trying to figure out damage control while also trying to find a place to live and dealing with Rebecca falling apart every 5 minutes. Hey." Rebecca's voice rose. "This is my mother we're talking about. I'm allowed to be upset. Your mother who's throwing us out with nowhere to go. Your mother who's destroying our lives over a tantrum. You're the one who told her to leave. You're the one who humiliated her in front of everyone. Because she embarrassed me first. Oh, grow up, Daniel." She came out of her room in her own apartment. The horror. I'd never heard Rebecca talk to Daniel like that. In 8 years, I'd never heard her challenge him, contradict him, raise her voice at him. It was like something had broken loose in her, like the stress had finally cracked through her careful compliance. Okay, everyone calm down. Kevin's voice, trying to mediate. Fighting among yourselves isn't helping. The question is, what are you going to do in the next 24 hours? I don't know, Daniel said, and for the first time, he sounded genuinely lost. Maybe we could try one more time to talk to her? All of us together. A family intervention type thing. Do you think that would work? The female voice. I don't know what else to try. I closed my door quietly and sat on my bed, my heart racing. They were planning an intervention. A group confrontation designed to overwhelm me, to make me feel like I was crazy or cruel for standing my ground. I knew how those worked. I'd seen enough Dr. Phil episodes to know the pattern. They'd surround me with people, all telling me I was wrong, all pressuring me to back down for the good of the family. They'd use emotion and manipulation and sheer numbers to make me feel like standing up for myself was the same thing as destroying everything. And the sad thing was, it might have worked. A week ago, it absolutely would have worked. I was so used to caving, so used to being the one who gave in to restore peace, that surrounding me with disappointed faces and emotional appeals would have shattered my resolve. But a week ago, I hadn't spent 3 days sitting alone in my room, thinking about what I wanted my life to look like. I hadn't spent hours remembering who I used to be before I let other people convince me to be smaller. A week ago, I hadn't discovered that I was tired of being afraid. Around 2 in the afternoon, the knock came. Eleanor, we'd like to talk to you. Everyone's here. Daniel's voice, carefully neutral. I took a deep breath, checked my reflection in the mirror. I looked tired but determined, and opened the door. They were all assembled in the living room like a jury. Daniel and Rebecca on the couch. Kevin Hartley in one of the armchairs. The woman, who I now saw was Sandra Morrison, Rebecca's college roommate, in the other. And standing awkwardly near the window, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, was Father Patrick from St. Stephen's, the Catholic church where Rebecca and Daniel had gotten married. They'd brought a priest. They were really pulling out all the stops. Eleanor, thank you for joining us, Daniel began, like this was a business meeting instead of an ambush in my living room. We asked Father Patrick and our friends Kevin and Sandra to be here because we think this situation needs some outside perspective. We need people who can be objective, who can help us all see clearly. I didn't sit down. I stood in the doorway between the hallway and the living room, keeping my exit clear. What do you want me to see clearly, Daniel? Father Patrick cleared his throat. Eleanor, I've known Rebecca and Daniel for 6 years now. They're good people. They've always struck me as caring, generous, and devoted to family. When Rebecca called me yesterday and explained this situation, I have to admit I was surprised. This doesn't seem like you. You don't know me, Father, I said gently. We've met perhaps 3 times in 6 years. You know the version of me that Rebecca and Daniel present to the world. You don't know what happens behind closed doors. That's fair, he acknowledged. But I do know what Rebecca told me, that there was a disagreement at a party, things were said in anger, and now you're asking them to leave with very little notice. That seems disproportionate. Did Rebecca tell you what was said at that party? Father Patrick glanced at Rebecca, who was staring at her hands. She said there was a conflict, that Daniel asked you to give them space. He told me to get out of the apartment by the next day. He said he'd been putting up with me for years and that I was a burden. He said this in front of 37 guests at a party in my own home, where I'd been instructed to stay hidden in my bedroom because my presence was an embarrassment to him. Silence. Father Patrick looked at Daniel, who suddenly found the floor very interesting. Is that accurate? The priest asked. It was a heated moment, Daniel muttered. I was drunk. I said things I didn't mean. Did you mean them when you said them? I pressed. In that moment, when you were angry and uninhibited, did you mean it? He didn't answer. Sandra leaned forward. Eleanor, I understand you're hurt. I would be too. But don't you think kicking them out is an extreme reaction? Your family. Families work through disagreements. How would you feel, Sandra, if your family treated you the way I've been treated for the past 8 years? If you were told to stay in your room when guests came over? If you were made to feel like your existence was an inconvenience? If you paid all the rent while being treated like a guest who'd overstayed their welcome? Wait. Sandra looked at Rebecca. You don't pay rent here. Rebecca's face flushed crimson. Mom's name is on the lease, but we pay for other things. Do you pay rent? I repeated. A monthly check or transfer for housing costs. Yes or no? No, Rebecca whispered. Kevin shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Daniel, you told me you had a rental agreement with Eleanor. We have an understanding, Daniel said quickly. We contribute to household expenses in lieu of formal rent. What household expenses? I asked. You buy your own groceries. You pay for your streaming services. You keep a separate checking account. The only utility you've contributed to in the past year is internet, and that's because you need it for work. Everything else, heat, electricity, water, building fees, comes from my account. The room had gone very quiet. Kevin and Sandra were exchanging looks. Father Patrick was frowning. So let me make sure I understand the situation, Kevin said slowly. You've been living here rent-free for 8 years. Eleanor has been paying all the housing costs. And at a party last week, Daniel told Eleanor to leave her own apartment by the next day. And now Eleanor is asking you to leave instead, and you're upset about that. It's more complicated than, Daniel started. Is it? Kevin turned to look at his colleague with something that might have been disappointment or might have been anger. Daniel, what the hell were you thinking? She's family. Daniel exploded. She's supposed to be supportive. She's supposed to understand that we're building our careers, our lives. Instead she's throwing us out over one argument. One argument, I said quietly, that revealed 8 years of disrespect and taking advantage. One argument that showed me exactly how you really feel about me. You don't get to use the word family as a weapon now, Daniel. You forfeited that when you treated me like trash. Eleanor, Father Patrick said gently, I understand you're hurt and angry. Those are valid feelings. But Scripture calls us to forgiveness, to turning the other cheek. Have you considered that Daniel has apologized, that Rebecca is devastated by this situation, that perhaps mercy is the Christ-like response here? I'd been waiting for this. The religious guilt. The implication that standing up for myself was somehow unchristian. Father Patrick, are you familiar with the story of Jesus clearing the temple? How he made a whip and drove out the money changers who were exploiting people in his father's house? Yes, but I don't see how that applies. They were using something sacred for their own profit, taking advantage of people's faith to line their own pockets. Jesus didn't forgive them. He didn't show them mercy. He threw them out. Because sometimes righteous anger is the appropriate response to exploitation. You're comparing us to money changers. Rebecca's voice was thick with tears. Mom, how can you say that? Honey, you've been living in my home for 8 years without paying rent. You've benefited from my generosity while making me feel like I should be grateful you tolerate my existence. If that's not exploitation, I don't know what is. We never meant to make you feel that way. Rebecca sobbed. We never meant to hurt you. But you did hurt me. Repeatedly. For years. And when I finally said enough, when I finally stood up for myself, your response was to threaten to cut me out of your life forever. That's not love, Rebecca. That's manipulation. Sandra stood up abruptly. I'm sorry, but I can't be part of this. Rebecca, I came here thinking your mom was being unreasonable. But honestly, I think you and Daniel need to take some responsibility for your part in this situation. Eleanor, I hope you all can work this out, but you have every right to your own boundaries. She grabbed her coat and left. The door closing behind her echoed in the sudden silence. Kevin stood up too. Daniel, we need to talk. But not here. He looked at me. Eleanor, for what it's worth, I think you're being more than fair. 1 week's notice after 8 years of free housing? That's generous, not vengeful. And just like that, Daniel's intervention was falling apart. Father Patrick stood slowly. I think perhaps I've made a mistake in coming here. This is a family matter, and a legal matter, and possibly neither of those things fall under spiritual counseling. He looked at me with something that might have been respect. Eleanor, I hope you find peace with your decision, whatever it is. Rebecca, Daniel, I'm available if you need to talk. But I won't be pressuring anyone to do anything they don't feel is right. After he left, it was just the 3 of us again. Daniel, Rebecca, and me. The intervention had backfired spectacularly. Are you happy now? Daniel's voice was low, dangerous. You've turned everyone against us. Made us look like villains. Destroyed our reputation. I didn't do that, Daniel. You did. By treating me like garbage and then being stupid enough to think you could manipulate me into accepting it. We have nowhere to go. Rebecca screamed suddenly. We have no money saved, no place lined up, nowhere to be by tomorrow. What do you want us to do, Mom? Sleep in our car. I want you to figure it out the way millions of people figure it out every day. The way I figured it out after your father died and I was left with nothing but bills and a child to raise. You'll find a way, Rebecca. You're both educated, employed adults. It might not be comfortable. It might require sacrifices. But you'll survive. This is cruel, Rebecca whispered. This is so cruel. No, honey. Cruel is telling someone they're a burden. Cruel is making someone feel like they should apologize for existing. Cruel is taking advantage of someone's love and generosity for 8 years and then throwing it back in their face. What I'm doing isn't cruel. It's called consequences. Daniel grabbed his coat. Come on, Rebecca. We're not getting anywhere here. We'll pack tonight and be out by tomorrow evening. Where are we going to go? Rebecca asked, her voice small and lost. We'll figure it out. We'll get a hotel for a week, find a short-term rental, something. But we're not staying here one more night than we have to. They left without another word to me. I heard them in their bedroom, opening drawers, talking in low angry voices. The sound of suitcases being pulled from the closet. I sat down in my living room, and felt the weight of what I'd done settle over me like a blanket. Heavy, but not uncomfortable. More like the weight of a decision made and committed to, the weight of consequences accepted. My daughter hated me. My son-in-law had always hated me, but now it was open instead of hidden. I was about to be alone in this apartment for the first time in years. And I was okay. Not happy, exactly. Not celebratory, but okay. At peace with a choice that honored my dignity instead of sacrificing it for the illusion of family harmony. If you've ever had to make a choice like this, if you've ever had to choose between being accepted and being respected, then you know this feeling. It's not triumph. It's not satisfaction. It's just this quiet knowing that you did what you had to do, even though it hurt. And if you're facing that choice right now, if someone in your life is making you feel like you have to choose between your dignity and their love, I want you to know something. Their love isn't real if it requires you to disappear. Check the description below for more stories like this, stories about people who chose themselves and survived. Because you'll survive too. I promise. The apartment was quiet except for the sound of packing from the bedroom. Outside, the ice storm continued, coating the city in crystalline armor. Tomorrow they would leave. Tomorrow I would be alone in the home I'd paid for, in the space I'd maintained, in the life I'd built and then allowed others to take over. Tomorrow I would start figuring out who Eleanor Pritchard was when she wasn't being someone's burden, someone's embarrassment, someone's ghost. I was 71 years old, and I was starting over. And the strangest thing? I was almost looking forward to it. Sunday morning came too quickly and too slowly at the same time. I'd barely slept, jerking awake every few hours to the sound of movement from Daniel and Rebecca's room. They were packing through the night, the scrape of boxes and the rustle of belongings being hastily sorted filling the dark hours. At 7 a.m., I finally gave up on sleep and made coffee. The kitchen was a disaster. They'd already started boxing up their things, leaving half-packed cartons on the counter, the table, even on top of the refrigerator. It was like they were trying to take everything that wasn't nailed down, claiming ownership of items I wasn't even sure were theirs. I didn't say anything. I just made my coffee and retreated to my room. The deadline was 5 p.m. 9 hours away. I wondered if they'd actually be gone, or if this would drag into something uglier, police, formal eviction papers, legal battles. I'd prepared for that possibility. Margaret Chen from Legal Aid had given me her cell phone number, told me to call if there were any problems. Around 10, Rebecca knocked on my door. Mom? Can I come in? She looked terrible. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hair unwashed and pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was wearing sweatpants and one of Daniel's oversized hoodies, and she looked younger than her 38 years. Vulnerable. Lost. Of course, honey. She sat on my bed and for a long moment didn't say anything. Just twisted her hands in her lap, tears sliding down her cheeks. "We found a place," she finally said. "An extended stay hotel in Bloomington. It's not great. But it's what we can afford right now while we look for something permanent." "That's good. I'm glad you found something." "Are you?" Her voice broke. "Are you glad we're leaving? Is this what you wanted?" "Rebecca, I never wanted this. I wanted to be treated with basic respect in my own home. I wanted my daughter to stand up for me instead of standing by while her husband treated me like garbage. I wanted to not feel like I had to apologize for existing. That's what I wanted. You and Daniel made this into an either-or situation, not me." "I know." The words were barely audible. "I know we did. I know I did. And I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." She collapsed into sobs then, the kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and painful. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to pull her into my arms the way I had when she was little and tell her everything would be okay. But I didn't. Because maybe everything wouldn't be okay, and maybe she needed to sit with that discomfort, to really feel the weight of the choices she'd made. "I love you, Rebecca," I said instead. "I always have and I always will. You're my daughter. But love doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. Love doesn't mean setting myself on fire to keep you warm." "I know." She wiped her face with her sleeve. "I know, and I hate that it took this, losing our home, facing these consequences, for me to really understand what we did to you. What I did to you. What are you going to do now?" She took a shaky breath. "Look for an apartment, I guess. Daniel's furious. He's barely speaking to me because I told him this was his fault. We've been fighting non-stop. He thinks I should have been able to change your mind, should have made you see reason. But I told him you were the one seeing reason, finally, after years of us taking advantage." "How did he react to that?" "He threw a lamp at the wall. We're going to have to pay for the damage." She laughed bitterly. "Just one more thing we can't afford right now." We sat in silence for a while, mother and daughter, connected by blood and history but separated by choices that couldn't be unmade. "Mom, do you think we can fix this? Eventually? Our relationship?" I thought about it carefully before answering. "I think that depends on whether you're willing to do the work. Whether you're willing to examine why you made the choices you made. Whether you're willing to accept that I'm a person with feelings and boundaries, not just a resource to be used or an obligation to be managed. I want to try. I want to do better." Then start by figuring out who Rebecca is when she's not just an extension of Daniel. Start by asking yourself what you value, what kind of person you want to be. And when you have answers to those questions, we can talk. She nodded slowly. Will you call me sometimes? Or can I call you?" "Give it a month," I said. "Give yourself time to settle, to adjust to this new reality. Then call me. And we'll see where we are." She hugged me then, quickly and desperately, and I let myself hold my daughter one more time before she walked into whatever came next. After she left, I heard them resume packing with renewed urgency. The sound of tape being pulled from rolls, boxes being sealed, furniture being moved. The apartment was being dismantled piece by piece. At 4:30 p.m., Daniel came to my door. He looked different than he had a week ago. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by something harder, more brittle. He'd aged in these few days, new lines etched around his mouth and eyes. "We're almost done," he said without preamble. "The moving truck is downstairs. We'll be out by 5. "Okay." He stood there for a moment, like he was trying to decide whether to say something else. Finally, "You know this isn't over, right? We're going to land on our feet. We're going to be fine. And someday you're going to regret this. You're going to realize you destroyed your family over your pride." "Maybe," I said calmly. "Or maybe someday you're going to realize that actions have consequences, and that you can't treat people like garbage just because they love you and will put up with it. Either way, I'm at peace with my choice." His jaw clenched. "You're going to die alone in this apartment, Eleanor. Old and bitter and forgotten. And when that happens, don't expect Rebecca to come running. Don't expect anyone to care. I'd rather die alone with my dignity than live surrounded by people who make me wish I were dead. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to get back to packing my own things." "What? Did you think I was going to stay here?" In this apartment full of memories of being made to feel small? In this building where your colleagues probably gossip about the crazy old lady who kicked out her family? I smiled. No, Daniel. I'm moving too. That threw him. I could see the confusion flash across his face. I have a friend from my old diner days, Lucy Martinez. She has a house in St. Paul, way too big since her kids moved out. She's been asking me for 2 years to move in, be roommates like we always talked about doing when we retired. I always said no because I didn't want to leave Rebecca. But now. I shrugged. Now there's nothing keeping me here. So you're just abandoning the apartment you supposedly care so much about? No. I'm giving my landlord notice and moving on with my life. The apartment was never the point, Daniel. The point was that it was mine, and you had no right to throw me out of it. The point was standing up for myself instead of accepting mistreatment. Whether I stay here or move somewhere else doesn't change that. He stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head. You're crazy. You know that. Actually crazy. Maybe. Or maybe I'm the sanest I've been in years. He left without another word. At 4:57 p.m., I heard the apartment door open and close for the last time. I waited a few minutes, then walked out into the living room. It was empty. Not just of Daniel and Rebecca's presence, but of almost everything. They'd taken the couch, the dining room table, the TV, the bookshelf. They'd stripped the walls of pictures and the counters of small appliances. They'd taken things I was pretty sure I'd bought. The coffee maker, the microwave, a lamp that used to be in my room. The apartment looked like it had been robbed. I should have been angry. Should have called them back, demanded they return my things, fought over every stolen item. But I just laughed. A short, sharp laugh that echoed in the empty space. They were petty. They were vindictive. They'd taken everything they could carry out of spite, like children throwing a tantrum. And I didn't care. Because they were gone. The weight that had been sitting on my chest for 8 years had lifted. I could breathe fully for the first time in longer than I could remember. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The ice from yesterday's storm was melting, turning the streets into rivers of slush. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed impossible, like the world was celebrating with me. My phone rang. Lucy. Eleanor. Did they leave? They just left. Took half my furniture with them, but they're gone. Oh honey, I'm so sorry. Do you want me to come over? I can be there in 20 minutes. No, it's okay. Actually, Lucy, about your offer to have me move in with you. Yes. I could hear the hope in her voice. Is it still open? Are you kidding? I've been waiting 2 years. When can you move? I looked around the empty apartment, at the space that held so many memories, both good and painful, and felt nothing but relief at the thought of leaving it behind. How about next weekend? I need to give my landlord notice, pack up what's left, but I don't have much. Most of what I own is already in my room. Next weekend is perfect. Oh, Eleanor, this is going to be wonderful. We'll be like Thelma and Louise, except with better decision-making and no cliff diving. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in days. That's a low bar, Lucy. Hey, at my age, low bars are all I can clear. Listen, I'm making pot roast for dinner. Come over. Bring whatever clothes you need for a few days. Stay with me until you're ready to move officially. There's no point in you rattling around that empty apartment alone. Are you sure? Eleanor Pritchard, I've known you for 43 years. Get your ass over here. After we hung up, I went to my room and started packing a small bag. Clothes for a few days. Toiletries. My medications. The photo album of Thomas and young Rebecca that I kept by my bed. As I packed, I thought about everything that had led to this moment. All the small surrenders, all the times I'd swallowed my feelings, all the years I'd spent being less than I was because I thought that was what love required. I thought about the Christmas party, about Daniel's face when he told me to get out, about the shock in his eyes when I'd fought back. I thought about the intervention, about watching it fall apart as people realized the truth of the situation. I thought about Rebecca's tears, about the daughter I'd raised and the woman she'd become and the uncertain road ahead of us. And I thought about tomorrow, about moving forward, about starting fresh at 71 years old in a house with a friend who'd never made me feel like I needed to be smaller. I zipped up my bag and took one last look around my bedroom. This room had been my sanctuary and my prison, my refuge and my exile. I'd spent 3 years sleeping here, and I would never miss it. The apartment door closed behind me with a soft click. Final. Finished. As I walked to my car through the slushy parking lot, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Kevin Hartley. I wanted to apologize for my part in yesterday's intervention. You were right, and Daniel was way out of line. For what it's worth, he's about to lose his biggest client. Word got around about what happened, and nobody wants to work with someone who treats family like that. Sometimes consequences come from unexpected places. Best of luck to you." I read it twice, then saved the number. Not because I planned to use it, but because it was confirmation. The truth had a way of coming out. Actions had consequences. And karma, it seemed, had a memory. I drove to Luce's house as the last light faded from the sky, leaving the city in darkness punctuated by streetlights and the glow of windows. Each light was someone's home, someone's life, someone's story of struggle and survival and small victories. Mine was just one of millions. But it was mine. Finally, completely, unapologetically mine. And that made all the difference. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in Luce's sunroom drinking coffee and watching the January snowfall when my phone rang. Rebecca's name flashed on the screen. We hadn't spoken since she and Daniel had moved out. I'd given her the space I'd promised, and she'd taken it. Part of me wondered if she'd call at all, if maybe this was the end of our relationship for real. But here she was, right on schedule. Exactly 1 month after I told her to take time. "Hello, honey." "Hi, Mom." Her voice was small, uncertain. "Is this a good time?" "It's fine. How are you?" A long pause. Then, "Honestly, not great. But I'm managing." I waited, sipping my coffee, letting her find her words. "We found an apartment," she continued. "It's small. 1 bedroom in Richfield. Nothing like what we had. But it's ours. Well, we're renting it, but you know what I mean. We signed a lease. We're paying rent." "How does that feel?" Another pause. Terrifying, if I'm honest. Seeing that money leave our account every month, knowing we can't just coast anymore. But also, kind of good. Like we're actually adults now, responsible for our own lives. That's growth, Rebecca. Daniel doesn't see it that way. He's still angry. Still blames you for everything. We've been fighting a lot. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? The question wasn't accusatory. It was genuine curiosity. Yes, I said honestly. I don't want your marriage to fail, honey. I just wanted to stop being treated like I didn't matter. Those aren't the same thing. No, they're not. But I think maybe Daniel and I need to fail a little bit. You know? Need to struggle together, figure out if we're really compatible when we can't just take the easy path. When we actually have to work for things. That's very mature of you. I'm in therapy, she said suddenly. Started 2 weeks ago. My therapist says I have issues with conflict avoidance and people-pleasing. That I've spent my whole life trying to keep everyone happy except myself. She says I learned it from watching you. That stung. But it was also probably true. Your father and I had a different kind of marriage, I said carefully. He never made me feel small. But after he died, maybe I did start living that way. Trying not to be a burden. Trying to make up for the fact that I was a single mother, that we didn't have much money, that your life wasn't what I'd wanted it to be. You gave me a great life, Mom. I never felt like I was missing anything. Except maybe a mother who knew how to stand up for herself. Maybe. She laughed, but it was sad. My therapist says I can't blame you for my choices. That at some point, I became an adult responsible for my own actions. She says I need to stop using I was just trying to keep the peace as an excuse for not doing the right thing. Sounds like a good therapist. She is. She's also expensive as hell, which is fun given our new budget constraints. But Daniel agreed to pay for it. I think he knows we need help. We talked for another 20 minutes about small things, her job, the apartment, the weird neighbors upstairs. It felt almost normal, almost like old times before everything got complicated. Mom, she said as we were about to hang up. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you forgive me? I thought about it carefully. I'm not sure forgiveness is what I'm working on right now, honey. I think I'm working on understanding. Understanding why it happened, understanding my part in it, understanding how to make sure it doesn't happen again. Maybe forgiveness comes after understanding. That's fair. She sniffled. I love you, Mom. I know I didn't show it very well, but I do. I love you too, Rebecca. Always. After we hung up, Lucy appeared with a plate of cookies, homemade chocolate chip, still warm from the oven. How'd it go? She asked, settling into the chair across from me. Better than I expected. She's in therapy. They're struggling financially, but she sounds different. More real, somehow. Good. She needed to grow up. Lucy bit into a cookie. You did a hard thing, Eleanor. Standing up like that. Lots of people couldn't have done it. Lots of people wouldn't have had to. Lots of people wouldn't have let it get that bad in the first place. Stop that, Lucy said firmly. You're not going to sit in my sunroom eating my cookies and beating yourself up. You did what you had to do when you figured out you had to do it. That's all anyone can manage. She was right. I was starting to understand that healing wasn't about erasing the past or pretending it hadn't hurt. It was about making peace with your choices, learning from your mistakes, and moving forward with better boundaries. Living with Lucy had been a revelation. We split expenses equally. We took turns cooking. We checked with each other before making decisions about shared spaces. We had disagreements, like last week when she wanted to paint the guest bathroom teal and I thought that was insane, but we talked through them like adults and compromised. We settled on a nice sage green. It was what living with family should have been like. Respectful. Equitable. Kind. I got a letter from my landlord, I said, changing the subject. The couple who took over my old apartment want to buy some of the furniture Daniel and Rebecca left behind. The stuff they took was apparently theirs to take, but they left some things. A bookshelf, a floor lamp, some kitchen items. The new tenants are offering me $500 for it. Are you going to take it? I think so. I don't need it, and they do. Plus, it's nice to get something back from that situation, even if it's not much. My phone buzzed again. This time a text from a number I didn't recognize. I opened it and felt my heart skip. Mom? It's Rebecca. This is my new number. I got my own phone plan, separate from Daniel's family plan. I wanted you to have it. Also, I wanted to send you this. Below the text was a photo. Rebecca standing in front of a bathroom mirror, holding her phone at arm's length. She was smiling, but it was a tired smile, a real smile. Not the bright artificial one she'd worn for so many years. New apartment, new start, the caption read. Learning to be my own person. Thanks for not giving up on me. I showed the photo to Lucy, who smiled. She looks like you at that age. That same stubborn set to her chin. God help her. Hey, that stubborn chin saved your ass. Maybe it'll save hers too. 2 months passed. February slid into March, the brutal Minnesota winter slowly loosening its grip. I fell into a routine at Lucy's house, morning coffee in the sunroom, afternoon walks around the neighborhood, evening TV shows and conversation. I reconnected with old friends from the diner, women I'd lost touch with over the years of living with Daniel and Rebecca. They welcomed me back like no time had passed, and I remembered what it felt like to have people in your life who saw you, really saw you, and liked what they saw. Rebecca and I talked once a week, sometimes more. She was working through things in therapy, asking me questions about my marriage to Thomas, about my childhood, about choices I'd made. She was trying to understand herself by understanding where she came from. Daniel, according to Rebecca, was doing less well. He'd lost 2 major clients after word spread about the Christmas party incident. His reputation had taken a hit, and he was struggling to rebuild it. He'd started his own therapy, though Rebecca said he mostly used it to complain about how unfair everything was. He still doesn't really get it, she told me during one call. He thinks the problem is that people found out what happened, not that it happened in the first place. Like if he'd just been smarter about hiding how he treated you, everything would be fine. Some people never learn, I said. But that's not your responsibility to fix. I know. My therapist says the same thing. She says I need to focus on my own growth, not on trying to save Daniel from himself. In April, something unexpected happened. Rebecca called and asked if she could visit, alone, without Daniel. He's at a work conference in Milwaukee, she said. And I want to see where you're living. I want to meet Lucy. I want to see that you're okay. She arrived on a Saturday afternoon, pulling up in a car I didn't recognize, a used Honda, practical and paid for in cash from selling the BMW she and Daniel had shared. Lucy greeted her warmly, no judgment, no mention of the past. Just you must be Rebecca. Your mom talks about you all the time. Come in, I made lemonade. We sat in the sunroom, the three of us, and it felt natural. Easy. Rebecca looked around at the comfortable furniture, the plants in the windows, the photos of Lucy's grandchildren on the walls. This is nice, she said quietly. Really nice. It's home, I said simply. Are you happy here, Mom? I thought about it. Yes. I think I am. Good. She smiled, and it reached her eyes this time. You look different. Lighter, somehow. I feel lighter. We spent the afternoon talking, laughing, sharing stories. Lucy told embarrassing tales from our diner days that made Rebecca laugh so hard she snorted. Rebecca showed us photos of the apartment she and Daniel had slowly been making their own, modest but genuine. As the afternoon light started to fade, Rebecca got quiet. Mom, I need to tell you something. Okay. I think Daniel and I are going to separate. Not divorce, not yet. But I need space from him. I need to figure out who I am without him. How do you feel about that? Scared. Sad. But also, relieved. Is that terrible? No, honey. That's honest. I found an efficiency apartment in Uptown. Just for me. I move in next month. It's tiny. Like, smaller than your old bedroom. But it's mine. Just mine. That sounds perfect. I don't know if Daniel and I will work through this or not. I don't know if I want to. But I know I can't be with him right now. Not when I'm still figuring out how to be with myself. I reached across and took her hand. I'm proud of you. Her eyes filled with tears. Really? Really? It takes courage to choose yourself. To say I need this even when it's hard and scary and everyone might judge you for it. I learned that from you, she said. From watching you stand up to us. From seeing what it looks like to finally say enough. After she left, Lucy and I sat in the gathering darkness, not bothering to turn on the lights yet. That's your daughter, Lucy said. Really your daughter, not Daniel's wife pretending to be your daughter. Yeah, I said. I think you're right. You did good, Eleanor. You did a hard thing, and it's paying off. It doesn't always feel like a victory. That's because real victories rarely do. They're not about trumpets and parades. They're about quiet moments in sunrooms, about daughters learning. Summer arrived in Minnesota the way it always does, suddenly, defiantly, as if apologizing for the brutal winter. Lucy's backyard became a sanctuary of green, her garden exploding with tomatoes and peppers and herbs that she tended with the same fierce devotion she brought to everything else in her life. I'd been living with her for 5 months now. 5 months of learning how to be Eleanor again, not someone's mother, not someone's burden, just Eleanor. A woman who liked her coffee strong and her boundaries stronger. Rebecca had moved into her efficiency apartment in May. She called me the day she got the keys, her voice bright with something I hadn't heard in years. Excitement that was just for herself, not reflected from someone else's dreams. It's perfect, Mom. Well, not perfect. The shower is basically a closet and I can touch both walls of the bedroom if I spread my arms out. But it's mine. I picked out the paint color. I bought a plant. I'm learning how to be alone without being lonely. Daniel, she told me, wasn't handling the separation well. He'd moved back in with his parents temporarily, which at 49 must have felt like a special kind of failure. He was still working, still selling real estate, but the swagger was gone. Word had gotten around about what happened at the Christmas party. In the age of smartphones, someone had indeed recorded part of the confrontation, and while it hadn't gone viral, it had circulated enough among Minneapolis real estate circles to damage his reputation. He keeps asking me to come back, Rebecca said during one of our weekly calls. Says he's changed, says he understands now. But I don't know if I believe him. And honestly, I don't know if it matters. I think I've changed too much to go back to who I was. What does your therapist say? She says I need to trust my instincts. That I've spent so long overriding them to keep other people happy that I don't even know what they're telling me anymore. So I'm learning to listen. In June, Rebecca asked if she could bring someone to meet me. A friend from her therapy group, she said. Someone who was going through similar things. Her name is Marie. She's 53, going through a divorce from a man who sounds a lot like Daniel. I think you'd like her. And I think she could use some, I don't know, some evidence that it gets better. They came on a Sunday afternoon. Marie was a tall black woman with silver streaking through her natural hair and eyes that had seen too much but weren't ready to give up yet. She shook my hand firmly, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "Rebecca tells me you kicked your son-in-law out of your own apartment. That must have felt amazing." I laughed. It felt terrifying. But yeah, also a little bit amazing. We sat in Lucy's backyard, drinking iced tea and eating the cookies Lucy insisted on making for every possible occasion. Marie told her story, 28 years married to a man who'd slowly eroded her sense of self, who'd made her feel like she was crazy for wanting respect, who'd convinced her that leaving would mean losing everything. "But then I realized I'd already lost everything," she said. "I'd lost myself. And what's the point of keeping a marriage if you have to disappear to maintain it?" "Exactly," I said. "Exactly that." We talked for 3 hours. About boundaries and self-worth and the complicated grief of leaving people you still love because loving them was killing you. About starting over in middle age and beyond. About the unexpected freedom that comes from choosing yourself. When they left, Rebecca hugged me at the door. A real hug, not the quick obligatory ones from before. She held on for a long moment. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For showing me it was possible. To stand up. To survive it. To be okay on the other side." After they left, Lucy found me in the garden, ostensibly deadheading roses but really just thinking. "That girl is going to be fine," Lucy said. "Yeah. I think she is. And so are you." I looked at my friend, this woman who'd given me a place to land, who'd treated me like an equal partner instead of a charity case, who'd reminded me what healthy relationships look like. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am too." July brought an unexpected phone call. Daniel's mother, Patricia, whom I'd met exactly 3 times in 8 years. "Eleanor, it's Patricia Crenshaw. I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from Rebecca." I minded, actually, but I was curious. "Hello, Patricia." I wanted to apologize. Her voice was stiff, formal. For my son's behavior. And for not reaching out sooner. "I've been hearing things, about what happened, about how Daniel treated you. It's inexcusable." "Thank you for saying that." Daniel he's always been entitled. His father and I, we gave him everything, maybe too much. We didn't teach him that other people's feelings mattered as much as his comfort. That's on us. It was more self-awareness than I'd expected from Daniel's mother. "He's my son and I love him," Patricia continued. "But that doesn't mean I'm blind to his faults. What he did to you, what he said at that party." Rebecca played me the recording someone took. I was horrified. "There's a recording." I hadn't known that. Several, apparently. They circulated pretty widely in Daniel's professional circles. His father and I tried to help with damage control. But honestly, Eleanor, some damage should be permanent. Some lessons need to be learned the hard way. We talked for another 20 minutes. She asked about my life now, seemed genuinely interested in hearing that I was happy. Before we hung up, she said something that surprised me. "Rebecca is lucky to have you as a mother. I hope she knows that." "I think she's starting to. Daniel could have learned something from you. About dignity. About strength. Maybe he still will, though I'm not holding my breath. 50-year-old men don't usually develop self-awareness overnight." After that call, I sat with the knowledge that somewhere out there, multiple videos existed of Daniel telling me to get out of my own apartment. Of him calling me a burden in front of 3 dozen people. Part of me wished I could see them, some vindictive part that wanted the evidence, the proof that I hadn't exaggerated, hadn't been too sensitive. But mostly I was just grateful that the truth had gotten out. That people knew. That Daniel couldn't rewrite the story the way he'd probably tried to. In August, Rebecca showed up at Lucy's house unannounced on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the garden, harvesting tomatoes, when I heard her car pull up. She got out slowly, and I could tell immediately that something was different. Her face was blotchy from crying, but there was also something resolved in her expression. "Mom? Can we talk?" We sat on the back porch, the harvested tomatoes piled in a basket between us, still warm from the sun. "I filed for divorce yesterday," she said without preamble. "Daniel doesn't know yet. He's going to get served the papers tomorrow." "How do you feel?" "Like I'm jumping off a cliff. Like I'm finally standing up. Like I'm terrified and relieved and sad and free all at the same time." She laughed shakily. "Is that normal?" "I think that's exactly normal." "I tried, Mom. I really did. We did couples counseling for 2 months. He said all the right things in therapy, but then we'd get home and nothing would change. He'd still blame everyone else for his problems. Still treat service workers like they were beneath him. Still make these little comments about how I was being too sensitive, too emotional, too much. You don't have to justify it to me, honey. I know. But I want you to understand, I didn't give up easily. I wanted to save it. I wanted to believe people could change. But my therapist asked me something that I couldn't stop thinking about." "What was that?" "She asked me if I'd want my daughter, if I had one someday, to be in the kind of marriage I was in. And I realized the answer was absolutely not. I'd never want my daughter to feel the way Daniel made me feel. And if I wouldn't want it for her, why would I accept it for myself?" "That's wisdom, Rebecca." "It's scary is what it is. I'm 38 years old, getting divorced, starting over. I make decent money, but not great money. I don't know if I want to date again or if I ever want to get married again. I don't know who I am outside of being someone's daughter or someone's wife. So you'll figure it out. One day at a time." She looked at me then, really looked at me. "You did this at 44, right? After Dad died?" "I did." "Were you scared?" "Terrified. But I had you. And I had no choice. Your dad was gone, and somebody had to pay the bills and put food on the table. So I figured it out. I don't have kids depending on me. I only have myself. Does that make it easier or harder?" "I don't know, honey. But I know you're strong enough to do it either way." We sat in silence for a while, watching Lucy's neighbor's cat prowl through the garden, probably hunting for the rabbits that kept eating the lettuce. "Daniel's going to be angry," Rebecca said finally. "Really angry. He's going to say terrible things about me. About us. He's going to try to turn people against me." "Let him. The people who matter will see the truth. And the people who don't see it aren't people you need in your life anyway." "When did you get so wise?" "When I finally got tired enough of being treated badly to do something about it. Wisdom isn't about knowing everything, honey. It's about knowing what you won't tolerate anymore." Rebecca stayed for dinner. Lucy made pasta, her grandmother's recipe, the one that required 3 hours and too much butter and was absolutely worth it. We ate on the back porch as the sun set, talking about nothing important and everything important, the way women do when they're safe with each other. When Rebecca left, she hugged me again. "I love you, Mom. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I'd given up on myself." "I never gave up on you. I just stopped letting you give up on me." September arrived with its particular melancholy, the awareness that summer was ending, that change was coming whether you were ready or not. The leaves started turning, and Lucy's garden began its slow retreat into dormancy. I was in the sunroom reading when my phone rang. An unknown number, which I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. "Eleanor, this is Daniel." My heart jumped. I hadn't spoken to him since the day he and Rebecca moved out, almost 9 months ago. "Hello, Daniel. I'm calling because I thought you should hear this from me, not from Rebecca. She filed for divorce. I'm assuming you already know." "She told me." "Of course she did." His voice was bitter. "You're probably thrilled. This is what you wanted, right? To destroy my marriage? To punish me for that one night when I said some things I didn't mean." "Daniel, I didn't destroy your marriage. You did that yourself. I just stopped being your scapegoat." "That's bullshit and you know it. Everything was fine until you decided to throw a tantrum at that party. Everything was working. And then you had to make it about you, had to play the victim, had to turn Rebecca against me." "Is there a reason you called?" I interrupted. "Or did you just want to yell at me some more?" Silence. Then, in a different voice, smaller, I lost everything, Eleanor. My apartment, my wife, my reputation. My biggest clients dropped me. People in my industry won't return my calls. I'm living with my parents at 49 years old. Was it worth it? Was teaching me a lesson worth destroying my life? Part of me felt sorry for him. A small part. But a larger part, the part that remembered being told I was a burden, that remembered years of being made to feel invisible, stayed firm. Daniel, I didn't destroy your life. Your choices did. The way you treated people did. The fact that you thought you could humiliate someone in public and face no consequences did. I just stopped enabling you. The rest was you. I apologized. You apologized when you realized there would be consequences. That's not the same as being sorry. What do you want from me? His voice broke. What do I have to do to fix this? To get my life back? I don't want anything from you, Daniel. But if you're actually asking, stop blaming everyone else. Stop acting like the world owes you something. Stop treating people like they're either useful to you or in your way. Actually change, don't just perform change when it's convenient. And if I do that, if I actually become this better person you think I should be, what then? Then maybe you'll be happy. Maybe you'll have real relationships instead of transactional ones. Maybe you'll look back on this as the moment you finally grew up. But none of that is my responsibility or my concern. You figure it out or you don't. Either way, I'm done letting your choices affect my peace. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I really did think I was doing you a favor, you know. Letting you live with us. I thought I was being generous. I know you did, Daniel. That's the saddest part. After we hung up, I sat with the conversation for a while. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired of the whole thing. Tired of Daniel's refusal to understand. Tired of being cast as the villain in his story. But I also felt free. Free of the need to make him understand. Free of the hope that he'd ever apologize in a way that mattered. Free of any remaining obligation to care about his opinion of me. Lucy found me in the sunroom an hour later, still sitting with my thoughts. Everything okay? Daniel called. He blames me for everything. Nothing's changed. She sat down across from me. Did you expect it to? No. But I hoped, maybe. That's because you're a good person. Good people always hope for growth in others. But you can't make someone grow, Eleanor. You can just make sure they don't stunt your growth anymore. When did you get so wise? She grinned. Same time you did. When I finally got tired of other people's bullshit. We sat together as the afternoon light faded, two women who'd learned the hard way that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to let go of the people who are drowning you. Even when those people are family, even when you still love them, even when it hurts like hell. But on the other side of that hurt was something else. Something I was still learning to recognize after all these months. Peace. Not the false peace that comes from avoiding conflict. Not the temporary peace that comes from surrendering your boundaries to keep others comfortable. Real peace. The kind that comes from knowing who you are and refusing to apologize for taking up space. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined. It wasn't neat or resolved or entirely happy. But it was mine. And that was enough. Thanksgiving arrived cold and clear, the kind of Minnesota day where the sky is so blue it almost hurts to look at. Lucy's house was full of people. Her kids and grandkids, a couple of neighbors, Marie and her teenage daughter, and Rebecca. Just Rebecca. No Daniel. They were officially separated now, the divorce proceedings slowly grinding forward through the legal system. She'd shown up at 10 in the morning to help cook, wearing jeans and a sweater that looked comfortable instead of expensive, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Put me to work, she'd said, and Lucy had handed her a peeler and a mountain of potatoes. Now, hours later, the house smelled like turkey and pie and all the things that are supposed to smell like family. We were crowded around Lucy's dining room table, the one that extended to fit 12 people if you squeezed, and going around sharing what we were grateful for. It was Lucy's tradition, one she'd maintained for 40 years despite her kids' annual groaning about how corny it was. But this year, nobody groaned. Marie's daughter went first, talking about her new school and her art teacher who actually understood her. Lucy's oldest son talked about his wife's cancer being in remission. One of the neighbors talked about finally paying off his mortgage. When it got to Rebecca, She paused for a long moment. I'm grateful, she said slowly, for hard lessons. For consequences. For people who loved me enough to stop letting me take advantage of them. She looked at me across the table, and I saw my daughter, not the woman who'd stood by while her husband mistreated me, but the woman she was becoming. Imperfect. Still figuring things out. But trying. I'm grateful for second chances, she continued, her voice steadying. And for mothers who give them even when we don't deserve them. When it was my turn, I looked around the table at these people. Some family by blood, some by choice, all of them here because they wanted to be, not because they had to be. I'm grateful, I said, for being 71 years old and finally learning how to stand up for myself. For friends who give you a place to land when you jump. For daughters who do the hard work of growing up, even when it's painful. And for discovering that it's never too late to choose yourself. Lucy, sitting next to me, squeezed my hand. And for best friends who've known each other for 43 years and are finally living together like we always said we would. Even if you did insist on painting that bathroom teal, I added. It's sage. It's teal. Everyone laughed, and the moment passed, and we moved on to the eating and the talking and the comfortable chaos of people who actually liked each other sharing a meal. Later, after most people had left and Lucy's family was in the living room watching football, Rebecca and I did dishes together. The kitchen window looked out on the backyard, now winter-bare but still beautiful in its own way. Daniel signed the papers, Rebecca said quietly, handing me a plate to dry. How do you feel about that? Relieved. Mostly. Sad too, but not as sad as I thought I'd be. Is that wrong? No, honey. That's honest. He's dating someone already. One of his clients. She's 29. Of course she is. Rebecca laughed, surprised. That's what I said. His mom called me to apologize for him moving on so fast, and I just said of course he is, and she actually laughed. Patricia's not so bad. No, she's not. She offered to testify in the divorce proceedings if I needed her to. About Daniel's character. Can you imagine? Your own mother offering to testify against you. Maybe she's tired of making excuses for him. Maybe. Rebecca scrubbed at a stubborn spot on a roasting pan. I've been thinking about something my therapist said. About how we teach people how to treat us. About how I taught Daniel that he could treat me badly and I'd just take it, the same way I taught him he could treat you badly and I'd let it happen. You're not responsible for Daniel's choices. No, but I'm responsible for mine. For choosing him over you, over and over. For letting it happen for so long. Rebecca. No, Mom, let me say this. I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. Not because things fell apart, but because I didn't stand up for you when I should have. Because I was more worried about keeping my marriage comfortable than about doing what was right. You deserved better from me. I set down the dish towel and turned to face her. I forgive you. I should have said that months ago, but I forgive you. She started crying, the good kind of crying, the kind that releases pressure instead of building it. I hugged her the way I used to when she was little, and she held on tight. I'm going to do better, she whispered. As a person. As your daughter. I'm going to make you proud. You already do, honey. By doing the work. By being honest. By choosing to grow instead of staying comfortable. We finished the dishes in comfortable silence, and I thought about how much had changed in 11 months. How many things had fallen apart so that better things could be built. That night, after Rebecca left and Lucy had gone to bed, I sat in the sunroom with a cup of tea and looked at my phone. There were messages from people I hadn't heard from in years, old friends from the diner, former neighbors, even a couple of Rebecca's aunts on Thomas's side who'd heard about everything and wanted to check in. The story had gotten around, the way stories do. I'd become a minor legend in certain circles, the 71-year-old woman who'd kicked out her ungrateful son-in-law and gotten her life back. People wanted to interview me for blogs about aging and empowerment. Someone from a local news station had called about doing a feature on seniors setting boundaries. I'd declined them all. This wasn't a story I wanted to perform. It was just my life, messily lived, the way everyone's life is when you're honest about it. But I had started something else. Something that felt right. I'd started volunteering at a women's shelter downtown, helping women my age and older who were leaving abusive situations or finding themselves suddenly alone. Women who needed to be reminded that they had options, that it wasn't too late, that they were worth fighting for. I told them about my experience, not as a triumph, but as a cautionary tale about what happens when you forget to stand up for yourself. About how hard it is to start choosing yourself after decades of choosing everyone else. About how it's still worth doing, even when it's hard. And I listened to their stories. So many stories of women who'd disappeared piece by piece, who'd been told they were lucky to be tolerated, who'd spent their lives making themselves smaller to fit into someone else's idea of what they should be. It was like looking in a mirror. Or rather, looking at where I would have stayed if I hadn't finally had enough. My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. "Thank you for today, Mom. For letting me be part of your new life. For showing me what it looks like to start over. I love you." I texted back, "I love you too, honey. Always." Then I opened my notebook, a new one Lucy had bought me for Christmas, beautiful leather-bound with creamy pages, and I started writing. Not this story, not exactly, but my story. The whole story, from the beginning. About Thomas and our good years together. About his death and the hard years after. About raising Rebecca alone and the mistakes I made along the way. About meeting Daniel and welcoming him into our lives and slowly, gradually, allowing myself to be erased. But also about finding my way back. About the Christmas party that changed everything. About learning that love without respect is just another word for captivity. About discovering that 71 isn't too old to start over. I wrote for hours, until my hand cramped and Lucy's house had gone completely quiet around me. I wrote until I'd gotten it all out, the anger and the regret and the hard-won wisdom. And somewhere in those pages, I found the thing I'd been looking for all along. Not revenge. Not vindication. Not even forgiveness, though that mattered too. Peace. The real kind. The kind that comes from knowing who you are and refusing to apologize for it. The kind that comes from making hard choices and living with the consequences. The kind that comes from finally choosing yourself. Outside, snow started to fall again, covering Lucy's garden in white. By morning, everything would look clean and new, like the world had gotten a fresh start. I closed my notebook and finished my tea. Tomorrow, I'd wake up in a house where I was wanted, not merely tolerated. I'd have breakfast with a friend who saw me as an equal. I'd go to the shelter and listen to more women's stories and maybe, if they asked, I'd share mine. Tomorrow, I'd live my life on my own terms, in my own way, without asking permission or apologizing for taking up space. Tomorrow, I'd be Eleanor Pritchard, not somebody's mother or somebody's burden or somebody's ghost. Just Eleanor. Finally, completely, unapologetically myself. And that was more than enough. It was everything. Asterisk if you've read this far, thank you. If you're in a situation where you're being made to feel like your existence is an inconvenience, please know this, you deserve better. You deserve respect. You deserve to take up space without apologizing for it. Asterisk. Asterisk it's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to remember that you matter. Asterisk. Asterisk and if you need to hear it from someone who learned it the hard way, you are not a burden. You are not too sensitive. You are not asking for too much. Asterisk. Asterisk you're just asking to be treated like a human being. And anyone who can't give you that doesn't deserve access to your life. Asterisk. Asterisk stand up. Set boundaries. Choose yourself. Asterisk. Asterisk it'll be hard. It'll hurt. People might get angry. You might lose relationships you thought were forever. Asterisk. Asterisk but on the other side of that pain is freedom. And dignity. And peace. Asterisk. Asterisk and you're worth fighting for. Asterisk. Asterisk always. Asterisk.